Hello, I'm Thelma English, and welcome back to British Literature. We're on session 13 today, and we will be looking primarily at Shakespeare's play, As You Like It, our second Shakespeare play. Let's open with a short word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege of home education. We pray that you would help us to be more effective in this world as we learn more about you and the way that you have moved through people and men and writers. I pray that we could become more educated, that we could become better Christians, better students, better Americans, that we could serve you better. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Here we are at Shakespeare's As You Like It. I put up as a screenshot here a picture of Sir Laurence Olivier's production of As You Like It. This was back in 1936. It is only about 90 minutes long. You can purchase it. It will have all types of different cover art because it is old. And so the cover art changes all the time. This was, if you know who Sir Laurence Olivier was, this was his first screen opportunity, was 1936. And to have Laurence Olivier, the heartthrob of his era, to have him come out in these tights must have been quite exciting and quite a big deal. So I want you girls to imagine yourselves going back in time to 1936 so that when Sir Laurence Olivier comes out as Orlando, our hero in the play, that you can faint or sway accordingly. Oh, let's make it fun. We should always make it fun. Let's pause our video for our devotion from Imitation of Christ. Okay, I'm back. If you are not in a classroom, if you are at home listening to this in front of your computer, then I highly advise you to get a copy. Either this inexpensive Dover copy, which has selections from Thomas à Kempis, or to purchase the whole thing. Go look at a used bookstore or somewhere on Amazon and find a copy of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, the full thing. It's worthwhile. You could leave this on your nightstand and read this when you get up in the morning or before you go to bed at night. He has just an uncanny relationship with Jesus Christ. What an amazing man. Session 13 schedule review. We're doing As You Like It today, and I hope you have your copy of As You Like It with you, whether it's a Dover edition or a Folger edition or another edition. Any edition ought to work. Most of Shakespeare's plays do have more than one official stamp of approval copy, and so they can vary with who is speaking the lines or the line numbers or something like that. With the Dover edition, you get acts, divisions by acts. Each Shakespeare play has 5 acts, you remember, and then each act has a number of scenes, and that varies from play to play. And the acts and the scenes are identified in the Dover copy, but they don't give you line numbers. So when I give you line numbers today, you'll have to kind of count. And that's why I use the quotations in case you want to mark that up in your copy. You're turning in your sonnet today. That's your half sheet of paper. You fold an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in half, leave a margin of at least ½ an inch all the way around, and you should have that all copy ready and have it in black and white. If your parent or teacher or facilitator has said that color is okay, then color is okay. If you have drawn any illustrations or decorations around the edges, if you have done any illustrations in pencil, they're going to turn out shabby, just as I told you. They'll be partly there and partly not there, and I'm sorry, but that's your own fault. Everything needs to be done in ink for it to show up just with black and white, and a portrait layout. And everybody by this time knows what that means. We're reading the complete play of As You Like It, the Dover copy. If you have another copy, you can read that. There is no syllabus reading this week. There is no writing. Next week, there will be a plot element quiz for the play of As You Like It. It is 15% of your Q2 grade. So please, please do a good job of reading this week so that you'll do well on your quiz. There is optional online. I believe it's 50 minutes long total, where I introduce each scene of As You Like It. Now, we will get started with that today, but if you would like a scene by scene introduction, do feel free to listen to that audio, and that will just help you more to understand the play. We're going to give you lots of information about this play today so that you can enjoy it and hopefully kind of laugh along the way as you read it. If you have to read it by yourself, I'm sorry, enjoy it. If you get to stay and read aloud in class, at the end, we'll probably just be a little over an hour, maybe an hour and a half with our lesson today, and you should have at least half an hour left at the end of class to start reading with classmates. And I would advise that you don't spend your whole time deciding who reads what. Just have somebody divide it up quickly and start reading for fun. It's really fun to get started with the reading. And next week, please remember to bring your copy of Paradise Lost. If you've got your sonnet, I want it turned in now. If you are just yourself, well, enjoy it. Maybe do some doodling around the edges and frame it if it's ready. If there are several of you or more, then do put together a little booklet. Hopefully somebody did some artwork. I usually have 4 or 5 different offers for artwork. If you have artwork, I go ahead and insert it as extra pages. If you need extra pages, that's up to your teacher or facilitator or the group or the student who volunteered to make the booklet. And if you want to show off your booklet to me, go ahead and take some photos and then email it to me at thelma.lito, L-I-T-O, @gmail.com. I would love to see your booklet, and you can send me some photocopies of that in an email, and I'd love to see it. Shakespeare, you need to recognize his birth and death dates. Born in 1564, died in 1616, and then 7 years later, a couple of his friends put all of his plays together in a large portfolio, and it's called the First Folio, the first time that they put all the plays together, because they realized these are just plays and they can vary, and they just picked the ones that they really liked and the editions that they liked, that they thought were the best, and put them all together. And that's called the First Quarto. And a First Quarto, if you could come up with a copy of that in your grandparents' attic or something like that. I believe the last one sold for $10 million. I think we looked at that last week and it was $10 million, something like that. So these are extremely valuable today. It's because it's a big deal. And these are the official copies of Shakespeare. And I believe the Folger Library sticks with these copies. If you're not familiar with the Folger Library, they are the ones who publish the Folger edition Shakespeare, and they have a library in Washington, D.C. I've never been there, but it's an awesome building, just the photos. One time, National Geographic did a photo spread of the Folger Library, and they're extremely active. They have probably the biggest Shakespeare collection of memorabilia in the world, and they are definitely the largest, if not one of the largest places to go for information. And they have a great online presence, so that you can Google Folger Library and find their website. They do performances and things like that also. But you need to know the years that Shakespeare was born and died. You need to know these years, because you have to recognize that the King James Version of the Bible was published in 1611 during the reign of King James, of course, and that Shakespeare lived not only during the reign of Elizabeth I, then she died in 1603. Yes, good job. 1603, the King James Bible. King James then was king. King James in 1603, there was plague broken out. I don't think they actually did all of his party coronation stuff for a year and a half, but he was king after 1603 at Elizabeth's death. And then Shakespeare lived until 1616. Now, this is a bit of a review, but I've tried to change up the words and the images. The Shakespeare embodies all the best of both forces: Reformation morality, principles from the Bible, creativity and humor from Renaissance viewed revived master storytellers. So this Renaissance revived, the Renaissance revival, once they translated all that Greek and Roman stuff, all the mythology of the Greeks and the mythology of the Romans, which was borrowed from Greece, all of that, and once it got translated from Greek into Latin and then into English, it was absolutely incredible the amount of material that it offered someone creative like Shakespeare. Tell him all of those hundreds of brand new stories and then let him go and write his plays. And his imagination is absolutely incredible. The play we're reading this week, As You Like It, happens to have lots and lots of Bible metaphors rather than Renaissance Greek and mythology metaphors from the gods and goddesses. This one's all about the Bible, which is really pretty cool. And yet it is a comedy. From Brush Up Your Shakespeare, this is a fun book. If you're loving Shakespeare, this is, I'm sure you can get this available used for just a few dollars. A lot of the books that I buy, I pay more for the shipping than I do for the book, because there are not very many people interested in classical literature or interested in Shakespeare anymore. So if you think Shakespeare is really cool, put it on your wish list, ask for it for Christmas, and parents, go find a used copy for your kid. This is really cool. This is by Michael Macron. Brush Up Your Shakespeare. And he says, if you have ever said any of these phrases, I'm being eaten out of house and home. Oh, the pomp and circumstance. It's a foregone conclusion. We've come full circle. It's got the makings of, or there's a method in this madness, or neither rhyme nor reason, or it comes in one fell swoop, or it's seen better days, or it smells to heaven, or it's you're a sorry sight, or he's got a spotless reputation, or those are strange bedfellows, or the world's my oyster. If you've said any of those things, you're quoting Shakespeare. According to Macron's research, some of these sayings have strayed slightly from their original meaning once taken out of the context of the plays in which they first appeared. Others have veered off the path altogether. It is almost impossible to say with absolute certainty when a word or phrase was first used, or even whom to credit for creating it. These words exist in the written record only as far back as Shakespeare. And that means Shakespeare gets the credit. If people were saying it on the street and it was commonplace, Shakespeare still gets the credit because he was the first one to write it down. So today we like to have everything with computer accuracy. And I'm sorry, you can't do that with Shakespeare. It's just not possible. But this is really a fun thing. Brush Up Your Shakespeare. It kind of presumes that you've had a little bit of Shakespeare and are ready to have some fun with it. And I think you're almost ready. According to Macron in Brush Up Your Shakespeare, the Oxford English Dictionary, that big set of dictionary that's multiple volumes and cost thousands of dollars, and only a few libraries hold this. I suppose now it might even be a phone app. That would be pretty cool to get a phone app of the Oxford English Dictionary, but I would expect to pay a pretty penny for that. Somebody will have to look that up and tell me if it does exist. Send me an email. They credit Shakespeare as the first to use these words among others. The whole concept of an arch villain, or to bedazzle someone, or something cheap, a cheap woman, to say that, or it's a cheap chair, something that might break, or a cheap woman, something vulgar. Dauntless, or the idea of embrace as a noun. Fashionable, a go-between. Honey-tongued, inauspicious, lustrous, nimble-footed, an outbreak. To pander, sanctimonious, time-honored, unearthly, vulnerable, and well-bred. Shakespeare gets credit for coming up with all of those phrases. Shakespeare's influence on everyday speech survived the subsequent shifts in language that resulted in the English spoken today. So, to use a familiar Shakespearean phrase, it seems that all's well that ends well. And of course, that's another play. This week, we began reading As You Like It in our Dover edition. If you have another edition, that's just fine. They're cheap but they do not have the line numbers. I never know if a Brit Lit student will fall in love with Shakespeare and wish that they had bought a Folger paperback edition, or wish that they had bought a hardback edition or something like that. So I never know. But whatever edition you have of As You Like It, it will have the convenience of the Dover with one play per book is rather nice. All right, when you are quoting act, scene, and line numbers, on the right, that's my favorite edition. It comes from the Folger Library. They're $5.99 or $6.99 for each play. It does come in a large print edition, and the book is, I'm not sure how my book is here, my Folger edition large print. It looks like it's 5.5 by 8, 5.5 by 8. That's a nice size book. And you can get this in a large print edition, but it is rather hard to find. You can't go on Amazon and say large print Folger edition As You Like It. They don't have their act together with that. You have to go to the Folger library online, go to the printing section where you order plays, and then they will tell you which ones are available in large print. Every year they're releasing more and more editions in large print. It is nice large print. You get better margins, and you can tell that it will last longer even though it's a paperback. If anybody does want, and these are $9.95 each. If anybody does want the ISBN, I'm going to give you the number now, but you will need to write this down yourself. The ISBN for the Folger edition of As You Like It, the giant print, is 978-1- 9821-0940-0. And in the US, that's $9.95. If you type that ISBN into an Amazon search engine, then it will come up with the large print edition of As You Like It. And it's identical to the little cheap paperback one that's $5.99 or $6.99, but it's certainly easier to read, and for just a few dollars more. I like it better, but my eyes are older too. Cite Shakespeare or find your place by citing the act number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, the scene number within the act, and then those line numbers. That's how we cite Shakespeare. Every Shakespeare play has 5 acts. You know that now. Remember that. A various number of scenes within each act. It can be 1 to 11, and a various number of lines in each scene. For example, if I print 1.3.44 to 55, that is citing Act 1, Scene 3, lines 45 to 55 in a play. And without the title, you wouldn't know which play. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm still spraying my throat and coughing. That appears to be the story of my life. I've always had really bad allergies, and I spend a lot of my time coughing. So you just have to forgive me. Can't wait till I get better, because I don't get better. All right. The abbreviation for As You Like It is incorrect on this slide presentation. So slide 14 here, it says ASLI. That obviously is incorrect. It would be AYLI. Oh, how funny. I try to get typos out of these because these are permanent classes that I'm making, and I'm not going to redo it again. So you're on your own. Remember, the 4-letter abbreviation for As You Like It is ASLI. Not as shown on this slide. The probable date of the first performance is 1599. That would be under, is that King James or Queen Elizabeth? Yes, Queen Elizabeth. She didn't die until 1603. It's blank verse. Do you know what blank verse is? You better by now. A blank verse is about 35% of the play. Rhymed lines are about 10% of the play. We look for rhymed lines, especially rhyming couplets, 2 lines that rhyme together. We look for those at the end of each scene, because very often that's how Shakespeare would close a scene, with a rhyming couplet. That way, somebody waiting off stage for their notation that the scene is just ending, they could listen for that rhyming couplet, and then they would know that scene ended, and they could run in and be in there for the next scene. Because remember, there are no curtains. People just leave and come. So the rhyming lines is a big deal. The prose lines, about 54%. There are 22 scenes, so lots and lots of scenes in this play. Some of them are very short with only a couple or 3 or 4 people talking. If you're dividing up parts, the number of men in this play, they all would have been men, 17, 4 women who are not women, they're male actors dressed as women. So you would grab, if you've got anybody in your class, any guy in your class who's 12, 13, 14 years old, kind of tall for their age and slender so that they can be convincing as a girl, and somebody whose voice has not changed yet and does not have a beard. That's what you need to make a girl. And then imagine that poor guy, you dress him all up as a girl and he has to play the girl. But that is his introduction onto the stage. And that was just expected, that a young guy getting into theater would play all the female roles at first. We'll see something funny. If you end up reading Midsummer Night's Dream, it's funny because they have a play within a play. Shakespeare does that quite a bit, where you have a play inside a play. And in Midsummer Night's Dream, there's a play within a play. The comical actors, they're kind of like the Three Stooges, but there's more than 3. And they're going to put on a play for the Duke, and they put on the play rather pathetically, but someone has to play the girl. And the youngest guy in their troupe does not want to play the girl. And he says, but I've got a beard coming. And so you've got comedy with that, knowing and we can lose that comedy today because, of course, we would have a female play that part. Occasionally, you'll have a production that uses all men, although that's not politically correct today because they're trying to do it as Shakespeare would have done it and dressed up the guys. I saw a great production in Ashland, Oregon, I don't know, 10 or 20 years ago, of Henry IV, or it might have been a Henry, I don't remember, one of the Henry history plays. And it was one with Falstaff. Falstaff is the big fat guy who we are told it took in the Merry Wives of Windsor, we're told that it takes 22 yards of fabric to make him a suit. So he's really a big fat guy. And he believes that he's God's gift to women. And the lady that runs the whorehouse is one of his good friends. And he has a scene in that history play where he goes to visit the whorehouse. And it's just a scene between Falstaff and the lady who is the one in charge of the whorehouse, so the older lady. And they did it all with men. And it's a history play, so it's kind of hard to create comedy. But wow, did they create comedy. When this lady of the night, this prostitute who runs the place came out, she was absolutely huge. She was just massive. She was a huge, very tall, of course, played by a guy. So this guy must have been, I don't know, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". And he came out, and every time he kind of halfway turned around, you realized that his dress was just completely open in the back, laced up so that it would fit anybody. It was a costume that didn't need alterations. It could just fit anybody. And you realize that under this long dress, Elizabethan style dress, he was wearing his army fatigues, green army fatigues, and green army boots that were kind of covered by the dress. And he was a sorry excuse for a woman. And this created humor. His makeup, his cheeks were painted on with red circles. His bodice was cut low, and he had some hairy chest showing, and you could see the stuffing coming out of the bodice. So it was a pathetic excuse, as I said, for a woman. And the wig was not on quite right or straight. And he was a big, really muscly guy. And he comes out on stage. And so when this woman, this guy who is male all the way, could win some type of physical championship, almost, Olympian level looking athlete for the decathlon or something, obviously works out, and obviously not a girl, not who you would pick to play a girl part, but that's what they've got. When it or he walks out on stage, this guy down in front of the Elizabethan Theater there in Ashland, Oregon, this theater goer who'd bought a ticket just started cracking up. This guy was hilarious. We looked at this actor on stage trying to play a woman, and he played the woman so badly that it just generated this wonderful humor. And the entire 1,200 people in the Elizabethan Theater in Ashland, Oregon, were all just cracking up and laughing. Then as the laughter dies down, you realize there's one guy down in front who just can't stop laughing. I don't know if he has a better view. I don't know if he just really needed to laugh, but he just kept laughing. And they kind of paused their lines and the performance to let this guy finish laughing. But it made it more wonderful for the rest of us. And of course, there are no pictures of things like that because of copyright and the actors and all of that stuff. But you can imagine how awesome that was to have a man play that woman. And you could do that if you're putting on a play or performing. You could do that. You could have guys play the women, and it definitely creates more humor. Definitely creates more humor. So there are 4 female characters in this play. And think about it, they would have been boys dressed up as girls. And at least one of these boys dressed up as girls for his part in the play is a boy dressed up as a girl who decides to dress up as a boy in order to take her cousin safely into the forest and not be accosted. And so it really gets funnier the deeper you go. As You Like It is of the pastoral tradition. What does pastoral mean? Well, the pastoral poem treats of shepherds and rustic life after the Latin word for shepherd, which is pastor. And so pastoral is having to do with shepherds and sheep and all that out in the country, or a real pastor of a church, or relating to the country or country life, the rural life, charmingly simple and serene, idyllic. So a pastoral tradition lets everybody relax because you're out in the country where no one's looking at a watch. It's a fun place to be. You can have all types of things happen. And of course, outside, and especially in a forest, is where Elizabethans would have believed that that's where the fairies lived. That's where magical events took place and that type of thing. It's a literary or other artistic work that portrays or evokes rural life, usually in an idealized manner. An idealized manner means you don't watch the shepherds scooping up the sheep poop, and you don't see the really hard things of a shepherd's life. You wouldn't see the harsh, cold reality. They talk it up and present it as it's idyllic to live in the country. As You Like It, for next week, you're going to be viewing a film of As You Like It, and I'm going to suggest that you watch one of the 2 I'm familiar with. One is this old, if you need rated G, then you need to watch the Laurence Olivier 1936 edition. The cover may not look like this. You do have to be prepared for the ladies. Rosalind and Celia are ladies dressed just exactly like this, with the little pointy hats with the scarves hanging off of them to cover their face for modesty when they need to. And they have high little trill voices. And that can be a little bit annoying, but you can say you saw Sir Laurence Olivier in his first production. If you're okay with PG, then I suggest Kenneth Branagh's As You Like It. It is done in Japan, not in Europe as we would like to see it done in France or in England, as the play would suggest. He does it in Japan. And when the people get saved, they don't get saved in a Christian manner. We're never really told how they get saved. But in Branagh's As You Like It, because it takes place in Japan, you have that insinuation that it's an Eastern religious transformation, that they're going to be sitting around with their fingers touching each other going om or something like that. But I do believe it's worth that because there's very little of that there. And the Branagh As You Like It is quite well done. You do have the low necklines that you're always going to have with Kenneth Branagh, and you do have sumo wrestlers. And sometimes the girls just can't deal with, they're laughingly embarrassing, the sumo wrestlers, because of course you have our hero Orlando, sumo wrestling with Charles the wrestler, and no one likes to look at sumo wrestler outfits. But you can get through this play without doing any fast forwarding or anything like that. There are a couple who roll around in the hay, but they are fully dressed. But that you would call that a little bit suggestive. This image is from Kenneth Branagh's As You Like It. The girl in the left, the blonde, is Celia, and the man right in the middle is evil Duke Frederick, who has usurped his older brother, Duke Sr., and on your right, the taller, slender girl is Rosalind. And so she is evil Duke Frederick, shown in this picture. She is his niece. Her father, Duke Sr., the kind one, has been usurped and driven out into the forest of Arden. So Duke Sr. has been usurped by his younger brother, Frederick, shown here, and has retreated into exile to the forest of Arden with a few followers. So the exiled Duke Sr.'s daughter, Rosalind, is left at the court as companion to the usurping Frederick, his daughter Celia. So Rosalind will make a comment. Eventually, Duke Frederick, evil, shown here. And here you can see that he has usurped, and they've shown it as a military usurpation where he's come in with samurais. And Kenneth Branagh does add that scene in the beginning. It's very, very dark, hard to view during the daytime because it's a dark screen and it's just dark. And there aren't any words. There's a little bit of gasping and running and heavy breathing as people are running and trying to escape. But he comes in the middle of the night. They have a scene with no real words because it's not in the play. That Kenneth Branagh is setting it up for you so that you have these samurais come in and they take over kind Duke Sr. and they drive all of his people away. And you see all of that in the entrance, in the beginning scene of Branagh's As You Like It. So that he kind of shows you what happened. Now the bad guy's in charge, the bad brother. And so he wants his daughter, the blonde one here, to be elevated, to be liked more by the people. However, Rosalind, shown here with the red hair, is well liked and everybody knows she should be there. And so she kind of irritates evil Duke Frederick because he knows that when the people look at her, they think of him being a bad guy and his brother being exiled to the forest of Arden. And so eventually Rosalind, shown here with the long red hair, is going to say something. The girls are going to decide to run away because Duke Frederick will tell Rosalind, you've got to be out of here in the next, I don't know, 2 days, 4 days. I just read it again last week and I can't remember, 2 or 4 days. You've got to be out of, maybe it's 10 days. You've got to be out of here or you die. And so she's crying and she's ready to just leave and she doesn't know where to go. Where will she go? And Celia says, well, don't you know if he banished you, he's banished me. I'm going with you. And Rosalind, the one in the red hair, Rosalind says, oh, no, I wouldn't let you do that. And Celia says, and you don't know my love for you. You know, we've been bedfellows together forever. And that doesn't mean that they're queer. That's the way people used to live. My sister and I shared not only a room. I was born in 1957. We shared not only a room, we shared a bed. That's just the way poor people did in the olden days. We didn't have all the bedrooms that you have in houses today, where every child has their own bedroom. We didn't even have our own bed. I was 18. I had to move away from home to get my own bed. So it has nothing to do with being homosexual. But they say they've been bedfellows together. And so Celia says, I'll run away with you. And then Rosalind realizes, oh, 2 girls running away together. This isn't a good idea. And Rosalind says, because I'm uncommonly tall, I think I should dress myself up like a man, and then we'll besmirch our faces. So they both look like poor, a man and his sister, and both of them poor. And that way they won't be accosted because beauty attracts robbers ahead of even money. So they want to look ugly and simple. And you'll usually have Rosalind, you might have Rosalind shown cutting her hair off, or else she wraps it up and tucks it all up under a hat and starts acting like a boy. So this is a guy, a Shakespearean actor dressed as a girl, and then his character has to dress as a guy again. So this gets pretty funny. This is from this is not from the Branagh edition. I found some of these pictures online. This would be, I can tell by the old man that's Adam. Adam has served their family for since he was a child. He's now 80 years old, and he's saved up quite a bit of gold for his old age. And he was taking care of these brothers forever. Their dad is gone and one brother's off to school, and we only hear from him once again. But here we have Oliver and Orlando, and one is evil, one is good. I can't quite tell which is which. I'm going to guess Orlando is the guy on the right, dressed more poorly and liked by everyone. And so the boys are fighting, and it's very hard for Adam to see these boys fighting. So a landowner living near the court, the evil Oliver Du Bois. So that's probably Oliver on the left. Oliver Du Bois is the older brother. So we have a usurping duke. We have a good Duke Senior, no name, and a good a bad Duke Frederick. Good Duke Senior, bad Duke Frederick, brothers. Then we have the Du Bois family. Oliver is the good brother, the younger brother. Oliver is the bad brother. I am getting old. Oliver is the bad brother, and he's plotting against his younger brother, the kind, intelligent, liked by all, Orlando. Orlando is our hero, and Adam is the old man. And it's very hard for Adam to see these boys fighting. And when the play opens up, Orlando is going to say he'll look dressed poorly, and it's a pastoral scene. He's taking care of, sheep or animals or something like that. And he'll give a little soliloquy where he tells the audience what he's thinking by saying his thoughts out loud. He'll say something, he'll say, Adam, just look by, here comes my brother, and you can see how poorly he treats me. And so the brother comes, and they end up getting into a fist fight because Orlando, the good brother, says something like, you don't even take care of me, you take care of me less than you take care of the animals. Our father left me 1,000 crowns or whatever, 1,000 pounds, something like that, and you haven't given that to me, and you're supposed to educate me, and I'm not educated. I want my inheritance. You get the farm, you get the property, but I want my inheritance. The younger brother would commonly get half or less of what the older brother got. Even as late as my mother's own age, farmers, for example, always left the farm to the oldest boy, who was expected to take over the farm. And everyone else might have gotten kind of a portion or got to work on the farm. And you'll see that as late as, 20 years ago, people still doing that, where the oldest son is the one who inherits the most, that type of thing. So he's the landowner. And that's actually a pretty big deal in Europe, is to be a landowner. They don't allow you to just own land the way we do in America here, where you can just buy a plot of ground and put your house on it. You can't do that. So the evil Oliver, after he has this fight with his brother, and Orlando it'll say he's got his hands around his neck. After this fight, Oliver, the bad guy, realizes, I'm going to have to get rid of Orlando. The people like him. He's so nice. They all love him, and I don't know why, but I hate him. And he says, I'm going to have to think of a way to get rid of him. And he will think of a great way to get rid of him. Oliver has refused his younger brother, good Orlando, the inheritance left to him by their father. He's refused to even clothe or educate Orlando properly. The evil Oliver deceives the simple, gigantic wrestler Charles into believing that young Orlando plans to trick or poison him to win a wrestling match. So Oliver has this big wrestler come to visit him that day. And the wrestler, Charles, who is always shown to be rather a simpleton, Charles says, Oliver, I'm wrestling for my own tomorrow. I hear your brother's coming in against me, and you need to pull him out of this because I'll kill him. He's too little. I'm fighting for my own reputation. And Oliver, evil Oliver, is thinking, this is my opportunity to get rid of my brother. And he says, Charles, you wouldn't believe it. If he can't win wrestling you by hook or crook, by cheating or whatever, he'll poison you. And Charles is just shocked. He seems to be such a nice young man, and to find out that he's evil, of course he's not. And Charles says, well, there goes his neck. I'll wring his neck. Anyway, he says it better than I can say it. That's why we read the plays Shakespeare wrote and not me. I can't say it. I can only read it. Charles then determines to kill Orlando in the wrestling match. Despite terrible new odds, Orlando wins the wrestling match. Yay, Orlando. Yay, Orlando. And here are the women. This is the Sir Laurence Olivier 1936 edition in black and white. I don't know if it's been colorized yet or not. And here are the girls, Celia and Rosalind, dressed up in those little, what I now would call Disney World little princess hats. And I suppose those are going out of favor now. Here they are begging him not to wrestle, or else this is right after he's wrestled, telling him how wonderful that he did. And Rosalind's giving him a chain to put around his neck, and finds out then who he is, that her father loved his father. And, his father is now dead, and her father is living in the forest of Arden. But they think, my father liked your father, so, maybe we should like each other. They don't say that, but we do have that Disney moment where they look in each other's eyes, and we have that boing, and all of a sudden they love one another tremendously. So despite terrible odds, Orlando wins the wrestling match. I do like wrestling better than sumo wrestling, but the sumo wrestling will do. And they slap each other up. I don't know much about sumo wrestling. I don't know if they actually do that. My guess is that they do. It's crazy the way they slap each other up. The boys will think it's hilarious, and the girls will think it's awful to see those big buttocks with the little sumo diaper on. And that will gross the girls, and the guys will think it's just awesome. So Orlando wins the wrestling match, however, and is applauded by Rosalind and Celia. Rosalind falls instantly in love with Orlando, and Celia will ask her in a little while later, "What are you thinking of, Rosalind? Are you thinking of your poor father? All cast away in the forest?" And Rosalind will say dreamily, of course, and I make kids evoke some of this imagery and emotion when they read the lines because I want them to have fun with it. And I say, "Remember, you have already fallen in love." And Rosalind says, "Not so much for my father, but my children's father." It's one of my favorite lines. She's already in her heart married Orlando, and he's going to be the dad of her kids. And so Celia realizes, oh my goodness, it's too late. She's already in love with him. And so it's pretty funny. That's how you add comedy. It happens very, very, very fast. And you know what I told you in Much Ado About Nothing? You have to put your disbelief up on a shelf. You have to ignore that. Shakespeare only has 2 or 3 hours to do the whole thing on stage, and you have to just go with the flow that they instantly fall in love. It's not much different than movies you watch. It has to happen really fast, and things have to be a little unbelievable, and you've just got to put your disbelief up on a shelf. Act 1. This is Sir Laurence Olivier as Orlando, and this is just after the boxing match. This version is only 97 minutes. If you can find it, it's black and white. It is possible that they've colorized it by now, but I'm not sure. I thought this one was kind of kooky and fun. I actually suggest you watch both of them because someday you are going to see that As You Like It is being performed, and you're going to want to go and see it. And this gives you 2 comparisons. It's so much fun to go see how they do plays on stage. There are always things they have to cut out, and you can see if they cut out anything you thought was important. Because to do it on stage, if you go to Ashland and you watch the full version, then that's kind of exciting. But if you go to another theater group, say a college theater group or a city theater group, they will always cut things out so that it won't be 2 or 3 hours long because they don't have that much time to stage it. And it's always interesting to see things that they cut out. There's a play, it's a later play of Shakespeare's when he's older and probably a grandpa. And he seems to, even in the tragedies where it appears that someone has died in the beginning, you find out later that they haven't really died. And so they're an unusual, they're called the later plays. And The Winter's Tale is one of those. And when a man, he gets unhinged. This is The Winter's Tale. I'm telling you a separate story from As You Like It. In The Winter's Tale, the king, for some reason, thinks his wife has had an affair with his best friend and that the child she's carrying is his and his friend's, not his own. And he has her thrown out and he thinks she dies in jail when really she's just gone into hiding because everybody else knows that she's actually innocent. She goes into hiding and she bears the baby. And later, when he realizes how wrong he has been and he wishes she was alive, they dress her up and they bring her out as though she's a statue of his long since deceased wife. So he doesn't know he has a wife and a child. And so he comes to admire this statue. And of course, 20 years have passed and it's not a statue. It's actually her looking like a statue. And he looks at the statue and he says, oh my goodness, it's so lifelike. It's so lifelike. It looks just exactly like her, except she was not so wrinkly. And my kids laughed hysterically when they read those lines because they realized, oh my goodness, since he threw her away and thought she was dead, she got older, she got wrinkly. And that he's looking at this statue thinking, well, she looks just like my wife, except my wife wasn't wrinkly like this. And we thought that created a great amount of humor. It was hysterical. And we saw it in Portland as a play, and they skipped that line. So when we went and got to meet the cast and shake hands with all the cast, this is way before COVID when you could still shake hands, and we got to meet all the cast and everything, one of my students asked, how come you didn't say the part about she's not, but she wasn't so wrinkly? And the cast member, said, we didn't think anybody would understand it. And that's where Shakespeare's at. And that was, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's where Shakespeare's at today. Nobody knows Shakespeare. So you have people like Kenneth Branagh trying to keep Shakespeare alive for another generation. And he throws in quite a bit of Hollywood trying to do so. Plus, I have no reason to believe that he is a Christian. And so he is under no compulsion to try to be clean or not make insinuations or have adult humor and things like that. So Branagh is trying to keep it alive for a new generation who doesn't mind in Much Ado About Nothing, doesn't mind the bouncing bun scene there at the very beginning, and doesn't mind the low necklines, and doesn't mind things like that. So it's a shame, but I would like you to be the educated ones. I want you to be the educated ones who get the jokes, who laugh at the jokes. So if you saw both versions of As You Like It just for fun, then when you get to go see it on stage someday, you'll know what they leave out, and you'll know how they deal with certain aspects of the comedy, how they present it, and you can imagine what you would do if you were producing it. Think of what I told you about the history play with Falstaff and the lady of the night, the head prostitute lady. Still in Act 1, when evil Duke Frederick learns that Orlando is the son of Sir Rowland de Boys, once friend to the senior Duke, whom he has exiled, he orders him away. So after the wrestling, when Orlando proves himself, his brother won't give him any money, so he decides to go fight this wrestling match and make a name for himself that way. Maybe he can become famous that way and earn, win some money and make a name for himself. And here he should. And so the evil Duke comes over like, wow, young man, you've just done awesome. What's your name? And he says, I'm the youngest son of Sir Rowland de Boys. And evil Duke Frederick, pulls his hand back and says, oh, I wish you had another father. I know everybody liked your father, but yet he was mine enemy. And poor Orlando, the good guy, is thinking, oh my goodness, I can't make it. It wouldn't matter what I do. I can't make a place for myself. And so he tells him, go away from here. Soon after, evil Duke Frederick banishes his niece Rosalind from the court as well. And I told you that was coming up. Duke Frederick's niece Rosalind and his daughter Celia have lived as inseparable sisters, but the Duke has noted that the moral excellence and beauty of Rosalind makes his daughter pale in comparison. So he wants to get rid of Rosalind, and I suppose that she would offend his conscience, that every time he sees her, he's reminded that he has usurped his brother and took over the kingdom and threw his brother out. Celia insists upon joining her beloved cousin Rosalind when she decides to join her father, kind Duke Senior, in the Forest of Arden. Because the girls, this is another edition. I've not seen this play, but this is great. The girl dressed up like the guy, she kind of looks like a guy. And Celia looks like an old maid. They've besmirched themselves. They do look poor and rustic. And this girl could pass for a guy who doesn't have his beard yet, 14, 15, 16 years old, who's just not going to have a beard. If you're a little bit Native American, like my family is, if you have a little bit, even a little bit of Native American, the brothers, the guys aren't going to get beards. And the beards that they get are soft and kind of flimsy, not enough to actually grow a thick beard. Neither of my brothers could ever grow a beard. And so they knew people in the Elizabethan age. They knew people who just weren't going to be able to grow beards. Some guys get a big, thick beard and some don't. And so they're going to run away. Well, where can they go? They're going to go to the Forest of Arden. And they do have, Celia has jewels that are hers, and they are going to go to the Forest of Arden. And they imagine, well, maybe we'll even find my father, Rosalind thinks. Maybe I'll find my father. But now here she is dressed as a boy, rather embarrassing for an Elizabethan era young woman. To be caught wearing pants would be pretty bad. So she doesn't want people to even know who she is because she's living as a guy. But Celia says, I'm going with you. And where are they going? Now the Duke has run away to where? The Forest of Arden. And now where are the girls running away to? The Forest of Arden. In a typical Shakespearean ploy, Rosalind takes charge, dressed as a young man, Ganymede, so she has a new name, Ganymede, Jove's, if you know classical literature, Jove, the main god, that's his page, Ganymede. And Celia says, my new name will be Aliena because now she's going to be an alien. So instead of Celia, Aliena. So you have to know that Celia is Aliena and Rosalind is Ganymede. And so they make it possible for the two young girls to travel alone safely. Duke Sr. and his men celebrate the simple life of the forest in a song. They sing. Shakespeare would have had original music and actual singers singing this. Remember, people have paid to come see a comedy, pay their penny or their 2 pence and see this comedy on stage. They expect to see costumes and changes and hear songs and music and have a big wedding at the end. Most comedies have a big wedding at the end with maybe 1, 2, 3 couples or more. And so this is no different. Their contented existence is reminiscent of Robin Hood. So they're singing there. Ganymede, who is Rosalind in disguise, wearing male clothing, arrives at the forest with Celia and the court jester Touchstone. They've decided to bring Touchstone with him. Many times when they put this on stage, they don't put Touchstone in a court jester's costume. And I think it's much more fun to put him in the court jester costume because he's going to run into a shepherd and say, hey, shepherd, who are you? You're speaking to your betters. And the shepherd says, well, they'd have to be pretty low to not be better than me. And so Touchstone, and for him to say these things dressed as a court jester is much funnier. Think of him with the 3-cornered hat and all of those. And then the morose guy who's always sad, Jacques, who is with the good Duke Sr. in the woods and very melancholy Jacques, who's always sad. Later in the play, after meeting Touchstone, the jester, he's going to come back running and tell the Duke Sr., the good Duke, he's going to tell him, a fool, I met a fool in the forest, and Motley's for me. I want his outfit. I'm Motley, that's what his outfit is called. He says, I've got to have a Motley outfit. And Duke Sr. says, well, you shall have one. And the moralizer, Jacques, who is always melancholy, always sad, and he's always talking sad, and he's always taking the darkest path in a conversation. But he realizes that Touchstone the fool gets to say whatever he wants to say. He can tell people exactly what they are. He can say whatever he wants to say because somebody will laugh at it. And as long as somebody laughs at it, he's not going to get arrested and thrown in jail. That's his job, is to make fun of everybody. And so the melancholy Jacques is going to realize, oh, that's for me. I want to be the fool. I can tell everybody what's wrong with them and never get in trouble because it'll be my job. All right. So they're all living there. And now Rosalind and Celia are running away with Touchstone. And where are they going to hide? The Forest of Arden. Good job. All right. Act 2. Well, this is continuing Act 2. The cousins, Celia and Rosalind, purchase a cottage and they live as brother and sister. Having been forced to flee for his life, Orlando also arrives in the forest. Orlando and his faithful servant Adam join the band assembled around the banished Duke. So poor Orlando, that's the good brother, Orlando and Oliver. Why they have to be so similar, I do not know. But Orlando and Oliver, Orlando couldn't win. Remember, he couldn't win favor or money by wrestling because Duke Frederick didn't like his dad. So Orlando, the good guy, is thinking, oh my goodness, how can I ever make a name? Then he comes back home, and poor old Adam, who's 80 years old and has served their father since he was a little boy before the father died and now serving the brothers. And poor old Adam says, oh, Orlando, you can't come home here. Your brother, since he couldn't kill you by the wrestler Charles, he's going to burn you down tonight. He's going to kill you tonight. And Orlando just says, well, that's the way it is. I can't fight him. What do you want me to do? Go rob people? I can't do that. I can't go become a crook. What do you want me to do? I may as well just stay here and take it, fight for it. And poor Adam just thinks, oh no, you're at the bottom of the pile for you have nothing left to think of. And Adam pulls out his little money bag and he says, I've saved such and such amount of money in all the years I've worked for your father, and I'm giving it to you. Go run away. Because of course, Orlando had no money, remember? And Orlando says, I'm not going to take your money. And Adam talks him into it. And Orlando says, well, I'm taking you with me then. And poor Adam says, well, I'm a little old for going, but I'll go with you. So they too run away. Where do you think they're going to run away to? They're going to run away to, yes, the Forest of Arden. Do you see? Everyone is going to run away into the Forest of Arden. Everyone has something to run away from. And then they're going to start running into each other. And you can imagine the girls have already run to the forest. Who is Rosalind already in love with? Orlando. Now Orlando and Adam are already in the forest. And so who does Rosalind love? Orlando. Do you think Rosalind wants Orlando to see her all dressed in pants as a guy? No, that would be very, very embarrassing. And it wouldn't really be appropriate for them to be in the forest together. So Rosalind's going to go to an extreme to make sure that Orlando doesn't find out it's her. When she does talk to him, he's going to say, oh, I'm lovesick. He's writing bad poems. He's writing poetry about Rosalind and putting it all over the forest. The melancholy Jacques, the guy who's always depressed, thinks that you're destroying the trees by writing all this poetry. Branna does a pretty good job of that. They're just printed way too big and things like that. But he does a pretty good job of having Orlando write his lovesick poetry to Rosalind and put it all over. But apparently it's pretty bad poetry. He's not a very good poet. And so Orlando is going to run into Rosalind, and she's, of course, Ganymede now. And he says, oh, I'm just lovesick. And she says, how do you know it's love? And he tells her, and she says, well, my uncle knew how to get people out of love. I tell you what, why don't you come visit me at my cote, C-O-T-E, and that's her sheep cote, where she takes care of the sheep, because Rosalind and Celia conveniently, remember they had money, they had a bag of jewels and money. They conveniently ran into a shepherd and his shepherd to be, and his boss happened to be selling the sheep coat. And so they've already bought a flock of sheep and a little house where they can live. So they've got a place to live in the forest. So when they run into Orlando just has no idea how long they've lived in the forest, maybe thinks they've grown up there in the forest. So she says, Ganymede, Rosalind, says to Orlando, I can cure you of your love if you want to be cured. You come every day here to see me and you pretend that I'm your Rosalind. And of course, she really is. You pretend I'm your Rosalind and I'll work it out of you so you won't be in love anymore. And that gets hilarious because he comes late and she's sobbing and crying and all upset because he's, 5 minutes late, and she gives him a dressing down, and it gets quite hysterical. That's how you create humor. So Adam and Orlando, they get into the forest, and he and his faithful servant Adam, and they join that assembled group that surrounds the banished Duke, and they're going to live there with him with his merry men, like Robin Hood and his men. So there you've got Orlando and Adam. Adam, you don't really hear from again, but Orlando, of course, now is in the forest, and Duke Sr. really likes him. And Duke Sr. is whose father? Rosalind. So Duke Sr. likes Orlando. And so if it works out for Orlando and Rosalind at the end of the play, Duke Sr. is going to be A-okay with that, which is really important to have your father's approval. Otherwise, you can't marry anybody in the Elizabethan age unless you ran away or something. And we have an incredible speech in As You Like It. Some people call it All the World's a Stage speech, and some people call it The Seven Ages of Man. You need to know that they are the same thing. All the World's a Stage or The Seven Ages of Man, and you need to pay attention. We're going to go through this and unpack all of these metaphors for you real quick. This is Jacques, the melancholy Jacques. He's always depressed, and he sees Duke Sr. and his men. They've killed a deer, and the deer appears to be weeping as it dies, and all the other deer go running by. And Jacques, it really bothers him. Nobody stops, no other deer stop to say to that deer, oh, are you all right? He's dying, and they just all run by him. And he says, run on, you fat and greasy citizens, because deer are, fat if they're healthy, that whole thing. And he has this melancholy speech because he's just seen this deer die and it doesn't even matter. And he says, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being seven ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and a shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Very sad, depressing speech. Okay, let's look at this speech again and unpack all the metaphors so that you understand. To begin with, he may be speaking directly to the audience. If you are the stage director, you have to decide, how are you going to do these first few lines? I would have the actor turn to the people who are watching the play and say, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. So everybody there in the theater, the whole world is a stage. And all the men and women are just the players. They have their exits and entrances. So just like actors, they have their time that they enter when they're born and the time when they exit when they die. And one man in his time plays many parts. And then he's going to go into the 7 ages of man, the 7 parts a man plays. His acts are 7 ages. So instead of a 5-act play, if you're talking about mankind, it's 7 acts. His acts are 7 ages. So the first act is the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then the next one, the second act, would be the whining schoolboy with his satchel, his backpack, and his shining morning face. You know, his mother's got him all cleaned up, creeping the snail like a snail unwittingly to school. He doesn't want to go to school. There's your next stage. Then the lover, who's sighing like a furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. A guy, the medieval idea was to write poetry to your true love. So you would write a poem about how beautiful her face is, how beautiful her eyes are. They sparkle like, stars in the night or something like that. And to make it a little bit humorous, he's even written a sonnet or a woeful ballad to his mistress's eyebrow. And that would be slightly funny to the audience then. Then he's a soldier. Then he's a little older. So first he's, 18, 19 years old, falling in love for the first time, writing poems. And then he's a soldier. Then he has to go off to war, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard. So bearded like the pard means bearded like a leopard. A leopard, do you know I call it the ring around the mouth, mustache and beard. That would be bearded like the leopard. He's got a little pointy beard with a mustache, and not too much hair, but he's bearded like the pard because that's the best he can do. And most guys want to grow a beard or a mustache or something as soon as they possibly have enough hair. And of course, that's kind of cute. Jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. So this is the age when we send them to war. That's the age when we send them off to war. They don't have wives and children yet. And that's, if we have a war, those are the guys that we send. They are at the height of their energy and prowess. They are the ones who are likely they'll risk their lives for their friends and fight hard and volunteer for dangerous missions and things like that. So the time of the soldier. What comes after that? Then the justice. So now he's back from war. He's all married and he's got a belly now, a fair round belly with good cape and line, eyes severe, and a beard of formal cut. Now he has a regular beard, a big thick beard, a regular looking beard, and full of wise saws and modern instances. So he's full of things like, I remember when, or yes, I remember, and gives all types of unwanted advice. So he plays his part. Then the sixth stage is when he goes into the lean and slippered pantaloon. Well, a pantaloon, remember the Elizabethan age and think of the Renaissance art you have seen with the guys wearing those tight pants and then the vest shirt thing. That's the age of Shakespeare. And so he's got spectacles on his nose. Now he's got a pot belly and he's wearing glasses on his nose and he's got a little belly bag on his side, his pouch on his side, his youthful hose, so his socks, well saved, are a world too wide. He no longer has big muscly legs, and that's the whole big idea of handsome, somebody who is absolutely the guy that the girls will fall in love with instantly, or ooh ah and faint when he comes out on stage, is the guy with the big muscly calf. Okay, he looks like a runner, a jumper, or something like that. So that his hose, his socks are really tight, and he's got that manly, muscly leg. So this guy, as he gets older, his hose, well saved, are a world too wide for his shrunk shank. Your shank, that's the muscle on the back of your leg below your knee, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes, and whistles in his sound. So then his voice is getting a little weaker. And the last scene of all, the seventh scene or seventh act that ends this eventful history, is second childish. If he lives long enough, he's going to get dementia and mere oblivion. And because this has some French roots in it, the French word sans means without. So that's it. He goes into second childishness. He's got dementia or Alzheimer's or something, and he's without teeth, without eyes, without taste, without everything. Okay, now we're going to read it one more time, and you will understand this for the rest of your life. And when you hear this on stage, hopefully they won't cut this out. If you see a performance, all the world's a stage. Remember, Jacques is very depressed. He's melancholy. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape and line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. It's kind of a depressing worldview, isn't it? You got to go to your Bible and get your cure. Read some of the Bible. All right. Did you notice that I read not line by line, but sentence by sentence? And you should be reading your lines this way also, reading aloud. Look for, if there is just a comma there, you realize, keep reading. It's part of a sentence. And you quit your sentence, quit your reading where you see an actual period. Sometimes we read line by line, not sentence by sentence. Do enjoy reading sentence by sentence. Act 3, Rosalind, who embarrassingly enough is out in the forest of Arden dressed like a boy. No ribbons, no dresses with her, she's a boy. Rosalind discovers that Orlando is in the forest. Oh no, and he's gonna see her in her pants. She's got to convince him she's a boy. Orlando's in the forest, occupied with hanging bad verses of poetry, all written to Rosalind, declaring his love for Rosalind from the trees. Since she is disguised as a boy called Ganymede, Rosalind decides to test Orlando's love by inviting him to practice making his love declarations to her. She says, you come here every day and I'll cure you of your love. And he's not sure he wants to be cured. Act 3, the clown Touchstone compares city life and country life with the old shepherd Corin, and almost succeeds in tricking Audrey into a false marriage. And so you have Touchstone the clown is talking with Audrey here, and he's trying to convince her to kind of pretend to marry him. There's a little bit of adult humor here, but there isn't anything explicit said in the text. He does say that he wishes she was poetical so that he could read Ovid to her. Ovid, who wrote the book Metamorphosis, about the gods and goddesses back in the first century, and then also wrote a book about how to trick and use married women. But if you haven't done classical lit, you won't pick up on that. But then he does decide he'll actually marry her for real. So Touchstone compares city life, country life, and there are a lot of metaphors there that you can unpack. If you read, if you want to read notes on it, if you do have a Folger edition, they'll have the notes explained on the left-hand page. The Folger editions of the plays that I highlighted at the beginning of class today, those plays, every right-hand page is text of the play. Every left, excuse me. Every left-hand page is filled with Folger notes, and they will tell you, they'll unpack some of the metaphors and explain to you unusual words the first time they occur anyway. So he almost succeeds in tricking Audrey into a false marriage. Excuse me, I'm going to pause my video for a minute here. Okay, we'll see if my voice will do a little better. Meanwhile, there's a young lovesick shepherd, Silvius, who is a friend of old shepherd Corin, and he's mournfully following the disdainful Phoebe. So there's a young lady in the forest named Phoebe, and young Silvius, who is a shepherd, under the care of Corin, the old shepherd, and Silvius is horribly in love with Phoebe. Remember love as a disease? Well, Silvius has it really, really bad. He can't think of anything but Phoebe, and he tries to tell her how much he loves her, and she's disdainful and scorns his love, and he'll get up and run away crying, Phoebe, 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 Phoebe. He's so in love with her. And Rosalind will accidentally overhear and see that conversation where Silvius, the young shepherd, tells Corin, the old shepherd, you don't know what it's like to be in love. You just don't know. And Corin says, I do remember. I remember what it was like. And Silvius says, no, you don't. He runs away, Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe. And when Rosalind overhears that, she's dressed as Ganymede, of course, and she says, oh, I see this lovesick shepherd. That's what my problem is. I'm in love. And of course, love is a disease in Shakespeare. It's something you catch. I think Rosalind will even say, when she meets Orlando, she'll say, you don't look like you're in love. You look rather point device. That means your clothes all look perfectly in order. You don't look like somebody who's in love. Your shoes should be untied. Your shirt should be buttoned crooked. Your hair should be all aflutter. People who are in love, it's a disease, and all those things happen to you. She'll say, I don't think you're in love. And he will insist he is. Act 4, Rosalind makes fun of the cynical Jacques and coaches Orlando in the art of love. Phoebe falls in love with Ganymede, who is not really a guy. So this presents a problem, and it's irritating to Rosalind because she's a girl. But Phoebe falls in love with Ganymede because he kind of looks like a guy from the city, and she's a country girl, and she falls in love with Ganymede. Orlando is supposed to be on his way to Rosalind's one day, to the Sheepcote where they live, and he comes upon his brother Oliver, because Oliver now, evil brother Oliver, is now in the Forest of Arden. Duke Frederick remember, his daughter ran away with her cousin. Duke Frederick has a storm scene where he storms and no one saw them go. Where did they go? And one of the ladies says, well, the girls were seen with the wrestler, the kid who won in the wrestling. And he's thinking, oh, Orlando, okay, go get him. And if you can't get him, get his brother. And so they can't find Orlando because he's already run to the Forest of Arden. So Oliver, the evil brother, is dragged before evil Duke Frederick, and he says, where's my daughter? And evil brother Oliver will say, I don't love him. I don't love him. And evil Duke Frederick will say something like, well, that makes you even worse. Go find your brother. So Oliver is in the forest looking for his brother, because if he can't find his brother and take him back to convince him that whether or not he knows where his daughter is, Oliver's going to have all his land, his money, and his life confiscated by the evil Duke. So Oliver's in the forest. So Orlando is on his way to Rosalind's, and here he comes on the trail upon his evil brother Oliver, who is asleep in the wood, but there's a crouching lion near the trail waiting for him to wake up, to pounce on him, and there's a snake curled around his breast or neck or something like that. And there's lots of artwork available on the net for that. You can see here in the lower left corner of the artwork here, there is the crouching lion. And then around his upper body here, he's got a snake curled. Both are just kind of waiting for him to wake up so they know he's not dead and bite him and kill him and eat him. So he comes across his brother, and that's his evil brother. What should he do? And he's thinking, serves him right. But he realizes Orlando, remember, he's our hero. He's also our moral hero. He can't leave him there. And so he fights off the lion, he fights off the snake, and he gets bit and he's bloody and he can't make his appointment with Rosalind. So Orlando rescues his evil brother Oliver and experiences a complete change of personality. I should rewrite this sentence, because Oliver experiences a complete change of personality, a kind of religious conversion. So Oliver realizes, oh, I was so wrong. I was coming to hunt you down, but now I realize you're good, and I'll give you, half of everything. In fact, I'll give you everything. So Oliver is repentant. Oliver is very repentant. And Orlando, the good brother, who now is scratched up by the lion, says, will you take this bloody napkin? I throw the handkerchief or something. Says, will you take this to, there's a boy who dresses and acts like Rosalind. Would you take this to him and give him this bloody napkin and say, that's why I didn't make it today? Meanwhile, Rosalind is back at the cottage waiting for Orlando to come, and he's not coming, and she's fuming and she's mad. And in comes Oliver and says, Orlando was supposed to be here. I'm his brother. And she says, you mean the wicked brother? And he says, well, yes, I was the wicked brother. Oliver says, I'm supposed to give you this bloody napkin. And Rosalind sees the bloody napkin, whatever it is, the bloody article, and faints. And Oliver will say something like, wow, are you sure you're faking it to be a girl? Because that faint looked pretty good. So Rosalind faints, and as he helps her up, he has some lines when he helps her get up, that he may feel the difference, that her body does not feel like a young man feels like a woman. He says, well, why don't you fake being brave if you can fake being a woman? And so here you have to decide, does Oliver know? Is the gig up? Does Oliver realize this is a girl dressed as a boy? And you'll have to make a guess. People have been guessing for 400 years. Oliver, now he's a good guy, remember? And Celia, she still hasn't fallen in love with anybody. So Oliver, now he's a good brother. Oliver and Celia fall instantly in love in an instant and want to get married, right? Instant. Ganymede promises Orlando. So now Ganymede comes too, and Orlando is there and says that he too will meet his love at the altar, because Orlando says, I can't fake it anymore. I got to have Rosalind. And so Ganymede says, well, then you will. I can bring your real Rosalind here by magic. I can bring her here. Sorry if you don't love magic. I don't love magic either, but it's just a plot element here. So obtain her father's consent and appear as Rosalind. And Orlando says, well, if you can do that, yeah, I'm going to marry her. And so she also, Rosalind also tricks Phoebe, because remember, Phoebe is in love with Rosalind, Ganymede. So she tells Phoebe, she says, if I could marry you, I will. But if you decide not to marry me, then you've got to marry Silvius, okay? And she says, well, sure. Because she doesn't realize, once she finds out Rosalind's a girl, she's going to think, oh, yeah, I'm a girl, I'm not going to marry a girl. So she tricks Phoebe into marrying Silvius, and Touchstone resigns himself that he's going to have to legally marry Audrey. Finally, Duke Frederick has arrived in the forest of Arden. Yep, everybody's in the forest. In the forest of Arden, he comes in the forest with the intention of killing all his enemies. But he meets a hermit who brings about a miraculous religious conversion. And this is the one thing I really don't like in Kenneth Branagh's version of As You Like It, is he makes it kind of an Eastern religious conversion, as though a monk, some type of an Eastern monk, and he's going to sit out in the forest and just meditate. It wouldn't be a true, but we're told it's a religious conversion. Full of remorse, Duke Frederick turns the dukedom back to his brother and takes up the life of a recluse in the forest. So Oliver became good. Oliver, the evil brother, became good, and he comes and tells Orlando, you can have your inheritance. And evil Frederick, Duke Frederick, comes and tells good Duke Senior, you can have it all. I'm going to live as a recluse in this forest. You've got two film versions to pick from, the 1936 or the 2006. There is nothing to fast forward through in As You Like It. There is the rolling in the hay, as I described, but they are fully clothed. There are those low necklines. There's nothing you can do about that. The sumo wrestling, I believe, would be the most offensive thing. But Audrey and Touchstone, who roll around in the hay, there are some allusions there, some what you might call adult humor, I suppose. But I'm guessing your kids have seen worse than that. So I would suggest you watch one or both according to whatever the views of your family are for viewing films, but done really, really well. Biblical allusions in As You Like It. There are so many biblical allusions. There is in Act 1, Scene 1, there is a reference to the prodigal son. And that is that story from Luke 15. If you want to make a little note in your book there at Act 1, Scene 1, it goes down the first lines, so lines 34 and 35, talk about a prodigal son. And that is referenced right back to Luke 15, 11 to 16. Shakespeare's Bible, what Bible was he alluding to? It would have been the Geneva Bible from 1560, or even the Bishop's Bible, 1568. King James was not published until 5 years before Shakespeare's death, and it's hard to say whether he would have had a copy of that or not. We really don't know. In Act 2, Scene 1, lines 5 through 7, they mention, here feel we not the penalty of Adam. And that's Duke Senior saying that even out here in the garden, out in the forest of Arden, that they are not suffering. They're not feeling that penalty of Adam. The penalty of Adam would have been that now you're going to have weeds and cold weather and bad weather. It's not going to be beautiful anymore. It's the penalty. And the Duke Senior is kind, and he's trying to make the best of it. And he says, here feel we not the penalty of Adam. But that's referring right back to Genesis 3. I believe you have 2 pages in your syllabus that are talking about biblical allusions in As You Like It. It's really amazing. In Act 2, Scene 3, there is mention of God's care for the sparrows and the ravens. And this is where old Adam, the servant of the Du Bois family, says that just like God took care of the sparrows and will feed the ravens, he's referring right here to Psalm 147:9 and Luke 12:6, where there's a reference that God gives to the beast his food, and to the young ravens which cry. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God? And so Adam says, he who takes care of the sparrows and the ravens will take care of me. And then in Act 2, Scene 5, lines 58 and 59, is referring to the last plague God brought upon Egypt to free the Israelites. And this is Jacques, who is saying that if he can't get what he wants, basically he's going to sit here and rail, he says, against all the firstborn of Egypt. And that's right out of Exodus chapter 12. And I don't say that this is Exodus chapter 12. I show chapter 12, but I don't say Exodus. So you're going to have to remember that here on slide 40, that's the book of Exodus, where he's talking about the firstborn of all Egypt. The King James Bible, to give you just a little bit of history on this, work began in 1604 by a committee of scholars headed by the noted classical scholar from Cambridge, John Boyd, born in 1564, years before Shakespeare. Look at 1604. King James came to the throne in the year, yes, 1603. And immediately he gets a committee together to publish a new edition of the Bible, thinking that will make him more popular. A good Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Bess, they called her she was the good queen. Everyone loved her. King James really had to fight for his reputation. Nobody loved him. Guided by his father, by the time Boys was 6, this guy that headed the committee, He had read, by the time he was 6, he had read the entire Bible in Hebrew. These are Puritans, kids of Puritans, and they know their Bibles, and they're teaching the Hebrew and the Greek to the boys and to the girls. These are some of the most well-educated people on earth. If you ever take American Lit, I will tell you that in the 1620s, think of that, 1620s, we had the Mayflower come over here to America. You've got these people exiled, fleeing from Europe. These are some of the most educated people on the face of the earth that started America. And that's why our Puritan heritage, that first 30 to 50 years anyway, was absolutely amazing. Even the relationship with the Native Americans was absolutely amazing. If you read William Bradford's journal, Plymouth Plantation, they did not break any treaties with the Indians. I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years, he says in his journal, but that's another class. This committee to translate the Bible, was split into 6 groups of translators, 2 in Westminster, 2 in Oxford, and 2 in Cambridge. Each of these committees had at least 8 scholars. After 6 years of meticulous work, the 6 groups sent their work to London for a final review. Boys was on the final 6-member review committee. From extensive notes he took during the process, we can see how tirelessly the final committee worked to hone the translation to perfection. Indeed, the final review committee's last benchmark was to ensure they produced a translation that not only read better than other versions, but also sounded better. And if you have familiarity with the King James Version of the Bible, you'll know that for reading, for example, the Psalms, it doesn't really get better than the King James. I don't believe it's the best translation or the only translation. I really admire the New American Standard. That's what we had to use in seminary when I did exegetical theology at Western Seminary here in Portland 25 years ago. And I do like the ESV. Each English translation actually has problems. Each of them has quite a few problems. You need to study the Hebrew and the Greek if you want to actually do theology. You can never depend on English translations. If you only have English, you don't even understand the big deal of Matthew chapter 1 in the genealogy of Jesus, when they say that Jesus, when Jesus was born, that, of Mary, Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus Christ. And in English, all we have is whom, that relative pronoun. And in Greek, that whom is a feminine whom, which just excluded Joseph from the genealogy of Jesus. It means that Jesus was born of Mary only. And all of that list of genealogy and all those other born of, all of those are male until you get to of whom was born. And that's when you realize Jesus was only born of Mary, not of Joseph. And that's pretty cool, but we miss all that. So don't think you're a Bible scholar unless you're reading the Bible in Greek and Hebrew. You need to take a few years of Hebrew and Greek. Hebrew, you need to go to school. Greek, you could teach yourself. It's easier than Spanish. You sure have fewer words because you're only learning the Greek words that have to do with the New Testament. You're not learning how to say, how do I find the bathroom? And how can I order dinner? It's a much narrower vocabulary. All right, so it even sounded better. And there is a beauty in the King James Version, especially some of the books. The King James Version of the Bible uses a rich vocabulary of about 8,000 different words. Shakespeare, by contrast, uses about 30,000 different words in his works. I've read anywhere from 30 to 40,000, so I'm giving you the lowball number here. The average well-educated person today has a vocabulary of maybe 15,000 words. You, listening to this, you've probably got a vocabulary of 8,000 words. Shakespeare was amazing. Thomas Carter, in his book, Shakespeare and Holy Scripture, argues that no writer has assimilated the thoughts and reproduced the words of Holy Scripture more copiously than Shakespeare. Shakespeare's works are saturated with the Bible. Peter Millward says Shakespeare's familiarity with the Bible is extensive. There's hardly a book in the Old Testament or New Testament which is not represented in his plays. This reflects his excellent knowledge of Scripture. In Shakespeare's religious background, Millward says the books he seems to have known most thoroughly, even in places by heart, are Genesis, Job, the Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Matthew, Luke, and Romans. It is amazing. And Shakespeare quotes Corinthians. I can't remember if it's 1st or 2nd Corinthians. I have not seen, ears not heard. In Midsummer Night's Dream, one character misquotes that horribly. In his use of biblical quotations, Shakespeare does not merely borrow an occasional phrase or allusion for enrichment of the dramatic language, but he derives the central ideas and images that run through all his plays. So even the ideas of the good guys and the bad guys and how they interrelate, those are all from Bible stories. In literature, especially medieval literature, a forest is where fairies live, especially in the Middle Ages. It's where magical things can happen. In Midsummer Night's Dream, the fairies are all in the forest. The forest helps the audience to let go of reality and set their disbelief up on a shelf. The forest, and you don't need much scenery to be in the forest. You don't need to have rooms and rooms of furniture, that type thing. Shakespeare's mother, her maiden name was Arden, like the Forest of Arden. They were a prominent Warwickshire, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, Warwickshire surname, presumably derived from the name of that forest. The Ardens had Anglo-Saxon roots in Arden, so before William the Conqueror, predating the Norman conquest. The Norman conquest, remember, was AD 1066 with William of Normandy taking over England, and then the Domesday Book, about 1085, maybe a little bit earlier than that. Domesday Book was the financial part of that, where that was his IRS, Internal Revenue Service, where they went around, found out how much land you had, how many animals do you have, and that's how he figured out how to tax everybody. And so they were in the Domesday Book. They were listed. So that means they were there before William the Conqueror. This is Shakespeare's home, of course, all remodeled and beautiful, and it has a modern roof now. It no longer is a thatched roof. There have been Shakespeares living in Arden since the Middle Ages. So Shakespeares were living there. But however, his daughter married, lost the Shakespeare name. His son died. There's nobody with the original Shakespeare name now, unless they're remote relatives pre our Shakespeare. Shakespeare was born in Stratford upon Avon, but the Arden area would have been part of his childhood grounds. Some trees there are supposed to be more than 2,000 years old. Some of these trees are huge. I looked this up online, and this is pretty cool. There's the Arden Society. There are all types of people. Most of the Forest of Arden has been built upon. There's just a little bit left, but these trees, many of these trees are left. The boundaries have shifted to accommodate more and more people. There are more than 500 of these big old oak trees that have a circumference of 15 or more yards. These are huge trees, huge, huge trees. And what is on the Forest of Arden? Here, what used to be just beautiful forest, there's the Charlecot estate. I'm probably really slaughtering these words because I'm not British, I'm all American. That's right exactly in the middle of Arden. It's owned by the Lucy family. It's the source of the spurious legend of young Shakespeare getting into trouble for poaching deer. That is thought to be false by anybody but conspiracy theory people like that he was poaching deer on this guy's property. The Battersea Clinton Manor is in the heart of Arden, surrounded by a moat, which is really cool. If you ever have a chance to go to London and visit castles, you really should. They have priest holes here inside. These are places where you could hide a priest. Jesuit priests after the Reformation. If somebody comes looking, you're hiding a Jesuit priest, aren't you? You know, you got to bring them out. They could hide them there. The Packwood House is neighbor to the Battleseas. Raphael Holinshed, that's the guy that wrote, remember, Holinshed's Histories of England and Scotland, and Shakespeare borrowed from those stories. He once stayed here. So it's even possible historically that Shakespeare would have met Holinshed, the guy that wrote these histories. But who knows? All speculation. So what do you think? Is the Forest of Arden a calm place of refuge, a pastoral Garden of Eden, or perhaps was it a cold, hard place of exile? The good Duke Sr. talks of Adam's curse and cold weather. Maybe it just depends on an escapist reading or viewing the play from a nice indoor home or stage. This is a picture of Jacques moralizing the deer. The deer's dead, and Jacques, leaning against that tree, is just thinking, how can you be so merry? We're the usurpers here in the forest. Very 2022. Jacques being all depressed and mourning to say, we're the usurpers. We're usurping the forest. The Globe Theater, built in 1599. Remember, Shakespeare died in the year 1616. So this is the later end of his career, this particular theater. There were earlier theaters. We're just not going there today. Shakespeare called this theater the Globe. He called it the Wooden O. There was no roof over the central part of the courtyard, but you had a roof that would protect most of the theater goers, except the poor people who had to stand down below in the courtyard. Shakespeare's company were called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. This theater burned down in June of 1613. The original Globe Theater opened in the fall of 1519 on the south bank of the River Thames, from across from the center of London. Remember, they had to be across the river. We think it was this 3-story wood-framed building with plastered outside walls joining at angles to form a polygon with about 20 sides. So all these short, straight sides stuck together to make a circle. Shakespeare's group leased the land from a scrivener. That's the name for what we would call a scribe or even a lawyer. The inside was described like a modern opera house with a raised stage. About 2,000 people paid 2 or more pennies to attend a performance. The Ashland Elizabethan Theater seats 1,200. So Shakespeare's Globe was even bigger. The Folger Library in Washington, D.C. has a digital art collection that has all types of images of the globe that are reproduced from people's diaries, and journals, people who made pictures of the globe. That's how we know what it looked like. The new globe is just like the old globe. If you ever get to London and have a chance to see a play there, pillars supported the ceiling. You can see the great big pillars here supporting that. The stage stood about 6 feet above ground level, so that if people threw things at you, they couldn't actually get to you. They had dressing rooms, but no main curtains to close a presentation. The dressing rooms were called tires, which mean like attire, changing your attire, the tiring rooms. They didn't have big curtains to close it off. They had to just move things on and off stage. Like the medieval plays, there was a trapdoor so that you could descend down into hell or down into the underworld, things like that. Male actors, of course, portrayed all the parts, even the female parts. They had very few props. You could use sheet metal, wave it around, simulate thunder. They would shoot off fireworks to recreate, omens from heaven. Let's see, musical instruments to create sound effects. Fake blood for wounds, that's been available since theater began, where you have a pouch of something red to look like you're dying. The gallery was covered with highly flammable thatch. Think of dried reeds and things like that for roofing, like all other roofs of the time. During a performance of Henry VIII in 1613, the globe burned down. Shakespeare actually fired a cannon as a special effect, and the roof caught on fire and the theater burned down. According to author Henry Wotton, a contemporary of Shakespeare, everybody escaped from the fire, including a man whose pants caught on fire. Per Wotton, the man was doused with beer to put out the fire, which sounds quite funny. Richard Burbage was an actor in the Lord Chamberlain's Men theater troupe. He played major characters: Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, King Lear, Romeo, Henry V, Richard III. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, the company became the King's Men, even though she's a queen. The King's Men. The first play performed in the Globe is thought to be, you guessed it, As You Like It. The Globe was built west of London Bridge on the south bank of the Thames River in an area known as Bankside, because it's on the side of the bank. Part of the London borough of Suffolk. It looks like Southwark, pronounced apparently Suffolk. It was a seedy section of Greater London, frequented by prostitutes, pickpockets, and other unsavory people. Not far from the Globe were the Bear Gardens, where Londoners attended entertainments in which a bear, chained by the neck or a leg, was attacked by dogs, including mastiffs, those big dogs. The sport was known as bear baiting. That was entertainment, just like cockfighting. More than 2 decades before the first Globe Theater was built, Queen Elizabeth herself attended an entertainment involving 13 bears. Yeah, kind of gross 2022. Okay, what about contemporaries? Christopher Marlowe and Robert Greene. Christopher Marlowe was part of the Admiral's Men troupe, another theater troupe. He wrote a play called The Jew of Malta that nobody reads today, but that later Shakespeare took it and dressed it up and made it into The Merchant of Venice and sold lots of tickets. Robert Greene, another dramatist like Shakespeare and an actor, declared Shakespeare was an upstart crow, beautified by our feathers. In other words, Shakespeare takes what we have and then he rewrites it. That's how he's beautified our feathers. This should help you to understand that, yes, Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. The author problem is not a real problem for real Shakespeare scholars. Like the Bible, people really love a good conspiracy theory, and discrediting authors, and Shakespeare is no different. So the globe was across the river. You can see in this old map illustration that across the river is on the far side is all of the city and the palaces and all that type thing. And here you've got the Globe Theater. It's a round building in this lower right, and there's another theater over to the left. That's the Globe. And in this map of London in 1599, you've got to go way down to this red circle and then see the little circle. That is the Globe Theater on this other side of London. You can see how most of the city, all the streets and everything, all the population is across the river. And he's just west of London Bridge. You can see London Bridge going over the Thames. So it's pretty easy to get there. Built in 1599, burned down in 1613, rebuilt the following year, then torn down along with other theaters by the Puritans in 1642, and then rebuilt in 1997 on the same plot of ground in the same shape, they think. So the Puritans, 1640, think about them. In the 1620s, some of the Puritans came here to America. 1642, we're almost to the time period of John Milton and Paradise Lost, and the Puritans were not real excited about theaters and the types of things that they performed and the things that they did and lewd jokes, anything like that. And they were able finally to have enough power to simply close down all of the theaters. Okay, remember, they're session 15, the week after next. Next week, you're going to view a film of As You Like It. And the week after that, you're going to have a 20-question multiple choice quiz. And then we're starting Paradise Lost. So do utilize the Thelma Read Aloud. I think it's about 50 minutes to listen to me give a synopsis of all of the scenes in As You Like It, unless you feel like you're ready to go. And when you come week after next, 2 sessions from today, please remember to bring Paradise Lost to class session. It says 14 next week, but it would actually be session 15, wouldn't it be? Any addition with line numbers should work. Don't get a Paradise Lost abridged version if you don't have your copy yet. I highly suggest the Norton Critical Edition. I realize it's expensive, $25, $27 new, but I'm always glad that I spent that money. If you're going to do anything with literature at college, you want this Norton Critical Edition for the notes and the references and all of that. You ought to be able to get these used on $15. I looked this week and these were the prices this week. Okay, Lord bless you and have a great week.